Good morning. This is Jerry Howard with the ESPN Richmond Radio 106.1 Intrepid Impact Leadership Broadcast. I'm here with Mike King, Mike on the mic, the partnership guru. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you today?
I'm excellent. And as a reminder, folks, I wanted to go through my resume and my failure resume as kind of a precursor to today's show. So you remember, I'm a leadership coach. I'm a business owner, a husband, father of four. Now, let's break that down and shatter the glittering image, because not only that, but I was a stay-at-home dad for 2 years. So you got this guy, he's got this MBA, he's running hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. But just like a lot of people after 2009, 2010, 11, I was a stay-at-home dad. And let me tell you what a wonderful experience that was. And we're going to talk more about that as well. But rewind even further back than that, and I was a certified jail inspector. So no matter how awesome you think you are, you don't actually need to show that particular side of yourself to the world. In fact, true authenticity is revealing that failure resume and shattering the glittering image. And I like to start off every show shattering the glittering image of myself as a reminder for me to be humble and walk with humility, but also to teach other leaders to shatter that glittering image. Because as soon as you start doing that, then you start to realize what you look like on the other side of yourself. And that's really the key here, folks. We learn leadership so that we can lead others. But if you have no idea how you come across to them, then you're never going to maximize your influence.
So you say learn yourself to lead.
Know yourself to lead yourself. That's exactly right. Because you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others.
Jerry Howard here on Intrepid Impact here on ESPN Radio. So you always come with great content for us to help us become better leaders, better individuals. As you said, you were a jail inspector. You were certified.
That's right, certified. So it only takes one visit to become a certified jail inspector. When they give you the uniform, you are officially certified. And I had multiple visits there through what I call my roaring 20s.
What does the roaring 20s lead to as far as 30s?
Recovering in your health. Let me just tell you what, I have to forget things now so that I can learn more, because I killed so many brain cells.
Okay. And you were trying your best to do all of those things, and you survived in spite of it.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is at some point you have to say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Enough is enough. I need to change. And you start to realize or recognize that you got something to lose. A lot of people walk around thinking they don't have anything to lose.
Everything to lose.
But you do. You have the potential that you have inside of yourself to lose. That's the number one thing, because you could probably influence a lot of people in your life. And whether faith is your motivator for that, whether business, whether it's a family, whatever your motivator for influence is, you have that potential to lose. And that's the real goal here with the Intrepid Impact broadcast, is to unlock the potential of people. We want to do that in an intrepid or a fearless way and make that change in your life. And these tools that we go over every week are really going to help you do that. And one of the things I think is top of mind for a lot of people, especially if you're into foreign policy, is, of course, the invasion of Ukraine.
Yes.
And that's a great segue into what we're going to talk about today, and that is control versus power, right?
Do people get those confused a lot?
They do, absolutely. People who have control rarely have power.
Okay, explain to our listeners the difference.
So let's say that you are Putin. He has control, but he daily is losing power because he's losing influence. Most people think, including of his own soldiers, think that he is off his rocker, that he's gone too far, that he didn't have an exit strategy or a game plan to see this thing through, and he didn't realize what all that control that he had over the USSR versus Zelensky. Zelensky's got power.
Which one is closer to tied to influence, control or power?
Power for sure, because if you think about the influencer taps into the power of everyone around him, whereas the person with the control only leads to the maximum potential that they have personally. And they can never delegate to others. They can never direct others. When you lead through others, which is really what leadership is, you should always seek to have power. And the only way you can do that is by recognizing how you look on the other side of yourself and bringing out the potential of those people that you lead.
On the mic with Mike, Jerry Howard is here with us. This is Intrepid Impact. He is talking about the difference between control and power. When people look at which one's more fleeting, Control or power.
Yeah, fleeting. Control is certainly more fleeting, and we see that with Putin right now as he's losing influence not only with the world but also with his own country. In fact, one of the things that they did to garner support of the population is they lie. So if you are hiding behind that glittering image that we talk about, that's a lie. So it's a lie to say that Jerry doesn't have a very colorful background.
Jerry has a very colorful background.
Right. And I live that out every day. I'm okay with that. But you have to get to a point where, hey, I don't care what people think about what mistakes I made. I want people to know, hey, what am I doing about that? What wisdom have I gained from that? I learned that the number one rule of jail is don't go back. That's it. Number one rule. People think it's to take out the toughest guy and all that stuff you see in the movies. Nobody will tell you that. The rule of jail is don't go back.
How many people fall prey to going back?
Quite a bit, in fact.
And why is that?
Well, if you think about it, I can tell you some statistics on jail particularly, and that is, including myself, is that 70% of people that are behind bars were under the influence of alcohol or drugs when they were arrested. So if we work on that foundational problem, then we can start to see, okay, 70% of the people that are in jail might not be there if they hadn't been on alcohol and drugs. Well, let's dig even deeper on that. And let's think about, okay, what kind of environment did they grow up in that led to them being on alcohol and drugs? Were they just experimenting and had a bad night? Well, maybe, but then they would learn their lesson and not go back. But see, what happens is we grow up in an environment where there's people around us that don't know how they look on the other side of themselves.
Okay.
They refuse to shatter that glittering image and recognize their own mistakes.
And we talked about the glittering image last week.
That's right. Yeah. So when we're talking about the glittering image is that image that we want the public to see. Right now I'm reading a book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, who talks about that glittering image that his dad put up in the beginning. He was this businessman. They lived in a rich neighborhood, but he treated them horribly. I mean, horribly. You got to read the book. Its first 2 chapters will tell you that whole deal. But that's the thing. The glittering image is the image that his dad wanted the neighbors, the rich neighbors, to see. When in fact, he was extremely abusive. He was a womanizer, all those bad things that you hear about. So you can think, hey, it's highly likely that David Goggins, because that's how his father was going to end up on alcohol and drugs. And I haven't gotten very far in the book to know if that's what happens, but I know that he had some serious side effects from that stress.
Intrepid Impact, Jerry Howard here. We're kicking off Tuesdays, 6:30. That's where you find them. And how can people find you out there in the social media world?
Absolutely. And so today, control versus power is really what I want to hone in on. And I like the jail topic because in jail, there's a lot of control, right? You don't really leave the cell unless you're allowed. You don't really turn the light off unless you're told. You don't really use the restroom unless you're told. You don't go to chow unless you're told, or lunch, or military term there. However, there are people in the jail that have power and they lead through others, through those hierarchies that we hear about or see about on these various TV shows. Because if you're in there, then you'll know that there is somewhat of a hierarchy, but at the same time, they're not micromanaging every little person. They're exercising influence based on leadership, leading others, right? And so the same thing when it becomes when we talk about leadership and power, I think about leaders versus managers. A manager might control every little thing, whereas a leader is going to say, hey, here's the guidance. Let's measure the outcome. And then you do it how you best can do it, right? So I'm not going to tell you exactly how to get it done unless you need help with that. But a leader is going to have a lot more power than a manager. And that's when you get into the higher level leadership, like CEOs and presidents of companies. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of influence, because they're leading through others and maximizing the influence or the potential of those people that are under.
Well, Mike Jerry Howard, this is Intrepid Impact. She is here talking about leadership. It is power versus control.
That's right.
And that's a big difference. And you said being a certified jail inspector, you change that outcome by changing your behaviors.
Absolutely. You change your behaviors. And here's the thing, a lot of people, if you don't start on the inside, if you don't start by leading yourself or knowing yourself to lead yourself, then you're always going to undermine your own influence. And to create a culture of empowerment and opportunity, you have to have a high level of support and a high level of challenge. And that's what we're really going to dig in today is what's called, the tool is called the Support Challenge Matrix. It was developed by a company named called Giant Worldwide. And Giant divides up culture into 4 categories. And that's really what we're talking about today. 2 of them have some control. One of them has none of anything. And then only one has the power. And the power is in the liberating quadrant. So if we create a culture of empowerment and opportunity, that is power. Because why? Now we're tapping into the potential of everybody under us. On the other hand, we have 3 other quadrants. One is the protect quadrant. That means that we're bringing really high support, but no challenge whatsoever. We've seen that in, we've got the helicopter mom scenario.
Okay.
So I have 4 children, as I mentioned. So we've got some parents that are more heavily involved in what actually happens on the field than they should be. In fact, they might be overbearing. But now you think about it, the kid, whether they want it or not, they deep down subconsciously they don't want it. That's the reason why they act out. Well, when you have a protecting environment, that means high support and low challenge or low accountability, then you're creating a culture of entitlement. So you know what the entitled kids, they scream and yell until they get their way, or they act out, or they shut down, or
they're entitled.
Yeah, you got to drag them out of the store, right?
Everybody gets a trophy.
Everybody gets a trophy. That's right. That's the culture of entitlement, but that breeds mistrust, right? So now that person doesn't trust you because you never held them accountable to their actions. So as they get older, they realize that you're not a trustworthy leader because they start seeing it elsewhere. Why am I so different? Is the question they begin to ask. So that's the protect quadrant. Then we have low challenge.
And this is the Giant model.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. This is called the Support Challenge Matrix. This is one of the 75 tools that we teach at Intrepid Impact.
Okay.
So low challenge and low support is called abdicating. So if you think of somebody that's abdicated, you think of somebody that's thrown in the towel, right? So let's say that you're mad because you didn't win, so you take your football and go home. Right. We're on the playground or whatever with our football, and we decide that we don't want to play anymore because what? Because we're frustrated, or we didn't have any wins. Whatever it is, if you think of the abdicating quadrant of culture, then you need to think about apathy, meaning like whatever happens, happens. I'm not worried about it. And low expectation, meaning this person is no longer expecting anything great to happen or anything bad to happen. They don't really care either way.
They don't care.
Exactly. And I like to think about, my son plays football for Manchester High School, and he's a starting linebacker for the varsity team. And if I had to compare it using that model, I would say it's, if I didn't care that he made the football team and didn't care how he got there and didn't care how he came home, didn't care what kind of grades he got, that's the culture of apathy, right? Or abdicating culture. I'm abdicating my leadership as a father, as a mentor for him.
And a lot of times there's a vacuum, there's a void there that you're leaving someone else to influence that.
Absolutely. That's well said, Mike King. That's excellent. Because if you don't lead, somebody else will. That's right.
The leadership is not going to disappear in a vacuum. Somebody is going to take it up.
It always will. And that's the reason why I like that we started with the jail analogy, because 70% of people in there were led by somebody at some point that encouraged them to start with the drugs and alcohol.
And so what you're saying, so when you change that behavior, you change where you end up at.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is it's never too late to change direction.
Okay.
I've listened to podcast after podcast of individuals that have changed their course. During I heard one guy who's the CEO of a large company, got in trouble for embezzlement, went away for about 8 or 9 years, but he actually requested to stay in jail after he was being released another year because he wanted to be able to impact those individuals in the jail that he was already working on.
That's a very different person.
That's right. But how did he get there in the first place? Well, he didn't know what he looked like on the other side of himself. He was very selfish, all about himself, stole a bunch of money, cheated a bunch of people.
That is something there. So one of Mike Jerry Howard is here. So this is, what's this called once again?
Intrepid Impact Leadership.
And the quadrant that we're talking about right now.
Right now, we're talking about the abdicate quadrant. That is low challenge, low support. If you've got a child and you just don't care what they do, That's abdicating.
You're abdicating your-
parenthood,
Yes, okay.
right? And so then the third quadrant is the dominate quadrant. And just by the name, I'm sure
You know what time it is.
You know exactly what time it is. We understand that culture. If you have that individual that just lords over you all the time, they bring high challenge, but they don't give you any resources or tools to fix it, then you're going to have a culture of fear and manipulation. Because what happens? Well, people recognize that if they don't do what you say, you're going to lose it. But at the same time, they're scared that if they don't achieve whatever result, then they're going to get canned.
Okay.
And so they're only going to work hard enough not to get canned because you're not bringing any support whatsoever. You're just
So you have
you
have to dominate the situation for them to do what they're supposed to do.
If you aren't tapping into their potential, absolutely. That's right. That's right. And so the dominating culture is one of fear and manipulation. Fear meaning you're scared to get canned, and manipulation meaning you as the leader
have to manipulate them.
Constantly twisting the truth, lying, hiding behind your glittering image. That's a very common thing, is that we act as leaders.
And that's a very tiring place to be.
It is very tiring. It's going to lead to burnout.
And, okay, that's what, so it doesn't have a long lifespan.
Not really, because turnover is going to lead to you being burnt out as the leader, but then you're constantly wondering why people keep quitting. Why won't people just do their job? That's the question. You know, why? Well, perhaps that you're creating high challenge, but not bringing the support. So if you're in a hospital situation, which I was a hospital executive for 5 or 6 years there, if you're telling the nurses and CNAs that they need to provide patient care, but you're not giving them the equipment to do it, that's a dominating culture. Now, how are they supposed to manage that? They're going to quit.
Right. They are not able to have a level of success because you're not giving them that platform.
That's right. And when they get to the point where they're quitting, they're not only quitting you, but they're quitting all the patients. And this happens.
Okay.
And that's the reason why it's so important to create a culture of empowerment and opportunity. And that's the fourth quadrant, or the green quadrant we like to talk about. And that's the liberating quadrant. If you bring high support and high challenge, hey, we've got to have a 5-star patient experience here. Oh, and by the way, I'm increasing your budget and your pay to create that environment. Or I'm going to go, Mr. Marketing Director, I'm going to go out there in the market with you, and I'm going to meet all of our case managers so that we can get more patients in. They're going to know that I'm heavily involved.
Is that the quadrant of success?
That is the quadrant of success. You can't expect to have success in a protect, abdicate, or dominate quadrant. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would you have success if people are scared? Because you're only going to get 30% out of it.
And you operate on the 70-30 model.
Oh, absolutely right. So 70-30 principle is where we're tapping into our strengths and things that energize us at least 70% of the time. Right. So if you're operating in a dominating quadrant, then you're going to be hammering people to accomplish things that are in their 30%. That's a really good point you made. Right. So if you know your people and you know yourself, then you know what strengths you need to complement yourself. So now you can really help people achieve their full potential.
Okay.
And that's what the 70-30 principle does. It helps us recognize that, hey, there's things that we're not good at, and it's okay for us to dabble there, but we don't spend all our time.
Jerry Howard here, Intrepid Impact, dropping nuggets of knowledge. Protect, liberate, abdicate, and dominate. You said liberate is the money quadrant.
That's right. I think that's why it's green. Green for go, green for money, maybe, green for profit, green for influence. But high support, high chat.
And that is where most of the influencers come from, is the liberate content. That's where most of the magic happens.
It really does, because think about, okay, let's go back to the football example, right? So son plays football. I'm going to buy him the helmet that he needs. I'm going to make sure he has a ride to and from practice.
You're giving him all the equipment to be successful.
That's right. And now look, what does high challenge look like? Well, son, you need to keep your grades up.
Right.
Oh, and here's what I tell him. I learned years ago that he was smart. And I told him, I said, I remember the first time he got A's, I was like, all right.
You know you can do it.
I know you can do it, man. The benchmark is 95. Now, if he gets a 90 or an 85 or whatever, we're just going to have a discussion about that. Like, hey, what went wrong here? How
but
can
if
I
he's getting a 65.
Exactly.
Jerry Howard here, ESPN Richmond radio talk show personality. We say dropping nuggets. They say, so if you're 95, we understand. That's where
right.
you are. 90, 85.
Okay.
Okay.
We had a tough day. Maybe practice is real hard.
You're coaching them up.
That's right.
But
we're not going to slack off.
Okay.
And just because we get towards the fourth quarter, or we get to the end of the fourth, not marking period, so they call it in class. we can't slack off. Just because you have a 20-point lead doesn't mean they can't come back.
No, because people watch the NBA all the time.
That's right.
So Jerry Howard is here, Intrepid Impact. How can people find you out there, sir?
Right now, we're looking at the Ephesians4u.com website. That's where you can find me. That's the fastest way to get in touch with me. If you fill out the form there, it'll get emailed right to me. But I want to announce that we
wait a second. Jerry Howard announcing. Here we go.
Hilarious. We have intrepid-impact.com. All right. Now that website has not launched yet, but what's going to be exciting about that is you're going to get to meet all of the Intrepid Impact team members.
Okay.
You're going to get to see a lot of these tools, explanations for them. You're going to have links to all of our social media so you can catch the old episodes that we've had before. We're going to be launching the Intrepid Impact Leadership Podcast as well. So if you miss an episode, you'll be able to catch it.
Come back and catch it.
All of this is going to be hubbed right there at intrepid-impact.com. Probably only a few weeks away from being launched, and that's why I'm promoting it now.
Jerry Howard out there dropping nuggets of knowledge. Jerry, I'd like to thank you for coming on. You're going to be able to hear him every Tuesday, 6:30 a.m. on ESPN Richmond. He is also one of the sponsors of the first quarter of Women's Speaking Sports RVA down at the Hilton. So, Jerry, thank you for coming on.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir.